Ethan Cole had never been to this part of space before. He had worked on many Terran Alliance missions, but none were like this. His assignment was simple in words, but strange in reality. He was sent as a human engineer to help a fleet of aliens, the Zevrans, adapt some of Terran technology to their ships. They were tall, silver-skinned, and famous for being very serious and cold. Their leader, Commander Valera Thane, was the reason Ethan felt nervous. She was known across the galaxy as strict, clever, and impossible to read. Ethan stepped onto the flagship Kareth's Pride and felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes on him. The corridors were smooth and metallic, shining under white lights. The walls hummed softly. Every sound he made seemed loud in comparison. He carried his tools in a bag, trying to appear confident, but inside he felt out of place. Every Zevran around him moved with precise steps, eyes straight ahead, and no one smiled. Valera was in the command room when he arrived. She stood tall, her silver skin almost glowing in the soft light, her violet eyes sharp. She glanced at him for a second, then turned back to her officers. That was all. No introduction. No handshake. Ethan blinked. He had expected some kind of greeting, some words, maybe even a warning about his duties. Instead, he felt invisible. At first, he tried to act normal. He walked to the engineering deck and met Lieutenant Dereth, a younger Zevran officer. "You are human," Dereth said in his own language, and then spoke slowly in broken English so Ethan could understand. "You will help, but you must follow the commander's rules. She does not like distractions." "I understand," Ethan said, trying not to look nervous. "I will do my best." Dereth gave a small nod. "Good, you may start with the plasma cores. They are different from Terran designs, but you will manage." Ethan smiled faintly. "I hope so. I always manage." Days passed, and Ethan quickly realized that Valera ignored him completely. Even when he worked on the engineering deck, she would come by for briefings or inspections but never looked at him, never spoke. Sometimes he would try to report small updates. "Commander, the plasma core is stable now," he would say. She would glance at the readings, then nod briefly, returning her attention to the officers around her. She never smiled, never acknowledged him as more than another crew member. Ethan tried not to feel hurt, but it was hard. He had been trained for space missions, for combat situations, and for tense negotiations. But nothing in his training prepared him for being ignored completely by someone who controlled the lives of everyone on the ship. He watched her carefully, trying to understand her habits. She had routines. She would walk the corridors alone early in the morning, inspecting the ship silently. She spoke softly to her officers, giving them precise instructions. When emergencies came, she acted quickly and without hesitation. She was efficient, clever, and frighteningly calm. And yet every time their eyes met, even for a brief moment, Ethan felt a strange tension. It was like she noticed him in a way no one else did, but she refused to act on it. One evening, while Ethan worked alone in the plasma core room, he heard soft steps behind him. He turned quickly, thinking it was one of the officers coming to check his work. But it was Valera. She did not speak. She watched him for a long moment, her violet eyes sharp and quiet. He cleared his throat. "Commander, I finished the plasma reroute. Everything is stable." She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and then walked away. No words, no thanks, no acknowledgement. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm his racing heart. He wondered if all Zevrans were like this, or if she was testing him in some way. As the days went by, Ethan noticed other things. When he moved through the corridors, Valera's bodyguards subtly shifted positions, almost like they were watching him more than anyone else. When he spoke in meetings, she would turn her head slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for him to see a flicker of interest. Or was it suspicion? Ethan couldn't tell. He tried to stay focused on his work, running simulations, fixing plasma conduits, and ensuring the ship's systems were stable. He did not have time for guessing games. Still, at night he thought about her. Why did she behave this way? Why did she ignore him and yet, in tiny, subtle ways, make him feel noticed? It wasn't long before a minor crisis gave Ethan a taste of the tension that always seemed to surround her. The Kareth's Pride was passing through a dense asteroid field when the ship's external sensors began failing. The alarms rang loudly and the ship shook as it narrowly avoided collision with a large asteroid. Ethan rushed to the engineering deck to check the systems. Sparks flew from overloaded conduits and smoke filled the room. He barely had time to breathe. Valera appeared suddenly, not in full armor but in a simple command robe. She moved with speed and precision, giving orders in the Zevran language. Ethan did not understand all the words, but the meaning was clear. She directed the crew calmly and efficiently. Then, without warning, she joined him at the core console. Her silver fingers worked alongside his as they rerouted plasma energy to stabilize the engines. Ethan felt a strange shock when their hands brushed. It was not painful, but it was electrifying. He glanced at her, and for a moment her eyes softened. She was not cold. She was not distant. She was focused, intense, and yet human in a way he had not expected. The crisis passed. The ship stabilized. Valera straightened and gave a curt nod to him before returning to the command room. Ethan watched her go, feeling a mixture of relief and confusion. He had worked alongside many humans before in emergencies. No one had ever caused this strange feeling inside him. That night, Ethan lay in his small quarters, unable to sleep. He thought about her, about the way she had worked beside him, about the tiny glance she had given him that felt almost personal. He shook his head. It was impossible. She was Zevran. He was human. Their cultures were different. She was the commander of a fleet. He was just an engineer. Nothing more could ever happen. Still, he couldn't stop thinking. He wondered what it would be like to talk to her as a person, not just as a commander. He wondered if she ever thought of humans at all, if she had feelings hidden beneath her strict exterior. He wondered why, despite being ignored for days, he could not stop noticing the way she moved, the way she looked, and the way the ship seemed different when she was near. By the fourth day, the tension was unbearable. Every time he passed her on the corridor, she seemed to glance at him briefly, only to turn away. Every time she spoke to her officers, he felt like she was thinking about something else, something he could not understand. He tried to focus on his work, on the plasma systems, on the ship's engines, but nothing could keep his mind from wandering back to her. Then, on the fifth day, something even stranger happened. A minor alarm went off in the engineering deck, a warning that a plasma conduit was overheating. Ethan ran to check it, and as he worked, he felt the same calm presence behind him. He did not need to turn around. He knew it was Valera. She did not speak. She only watched as he carefully removed the damaged conduit and replaced it with a new one. Her eyes followed every movement, and for a brief moment she leaned slightly closer as if to see better. Ethan's heart pounded. He had no idea what to say. He did not want to speak in case he broke some unknown protocol. When the work was finished, she turned and left without a word. But this time something had changed. Her glance, though brief, carried a weight he could feel. It was not hostility. It was not coldness. It was recognition. Ethan realized as he stood there alone in the hum of the ship that he had no idea what Valera Thane was thinking, and he also realized that he wanted to know. He wanted to understand why she ignored him and yet seemed to notice him in ways no one else did. He wanted to find out what was behind her calm, violet eyes. As he cleaned his tools and double-checked the systems, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. No matter how difficult it was, no matter how different their worlds were, he would figure out the truth about Commander Valera Thane. He did not know if it would be dangerous, impossible, or even foolish. But he knew one thing. He could not ignore the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. Little did he know that the next few days would change everything. The silence that had stretched between them would not last forever, and the commander who ignored him would soon call him something he could never have imagined. Something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about duty, loyalty, and the strange, unexpected connections that could form across the galaxy. The days after the plasma conduit incident were strange for Ethan. Commander Valera Thane continued to ignore him in public, moving through the corridors with the same calm, precise steps as always. But now there was a difference. Sometimes when she passed him, her violet eyes flickered briefly toward him before she looked away. A single blink, a subtle movement. It was almost unnoticeable, but to Ethan, it was like a signal he could not read. He tried to act normal, focusing on the work he was assigned to. The plasma cores needed adjustments to handle the increased power output for the new human technology he had integrated. Other engineers, both Zevran and human, moved around him in a blur, but Ethan could hardly concentrate. Every few minutes he found himself glancing toward the command room, wondering if she was there, if she was watching. One morning, the Kareth's Pride received orders to navigate a dense asteroid cluster near the uncharted sector of Zeta 9. These asteroids were unpredictable. floating at different speeds and directions, some with heavy metal cores. The ship's sensors detected movement, but the readings were inconsistent. Ethan checked the plasma conduits as the ship shook from minor collisions with small rocks, and he realized that even minor damage could make the engines fail. Valira entered the engineering deck without warning, her presence commanding attention. "Ethan," she said in her careful English, the first word she had addressed directly to him outside an emergency. "Monitor the plasma levels closely." "I do not want another failure." Ethan nodded quickly. "Yes, Commander. I'm on it." Her eyes scanned the room, briefly pausing on the new conduit he had installed. For a moment she studied his work like an inspector, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and left without another word, her long silver cloak swishing behind her. Ethan exhaled and shook his head. That was different. She had spoken directly to him, even if it was only for a few seconds. The asteroid field was worse than expected. The ship shuddered as it dodged rocks the size of small buildings. Warnings blared and alarms shook the floor. Ethan ran to the plasma core room, where several Zevran engineers were already trying to stabilize the system. Sparks flew from broken panels and smoke filled the air. Valira arrived again. This time she did not just give orders from a distance. She stepped forward, moving among the crew, her silver fingers touching controls, checking systems, and making adjustments herself. Ethan felt a jolt in his chest. She was not supposed to do this. Commanders did not fix systems themselves. They ordered others to do it. "Ethan," she said quickly, pointing to a failing plasma regulator. "Reroute the secondary power, now." He obeyed immediately, hands shaking slightly from the intensity of the moment. Together, they worked side by side, rerouting energy through temporary conduits, stabilizing the plasma flow, and preventing a complete engine shutdown. Their hands brushed as they worked, and Ethan felt that same strange shock as before. His heart pounded in a way he did not understand. When the crisis ended, the room was silent except for the hum of the engines. Valira straightened, her expression calm again. She looked at Ethan for a long second, her violet eyes searching his. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, "You risk yourself too easily." Ethan looked at her, surprised. "It's my job, Commander. That's what I do." She nodded once and left the room, and for a moment Ethan thought she might speak again. But she didn't. The silence returned. That night Ethan could not sleep. He kept thinking about the way she had moved, the way her eyes had held his for a brief moment, and the words she had spoken. "You risk yourself too easily." It was a simple statement, but to him it felt personal. Why had she said it? Why had she looked at him that way? He could not answer. 2 days later, they encountered a small Zevran scout vessel that had malfunctioned near a small gas giant. The crew needed help repairing the engines. Ethan was assigned to assist, and to his surprise, Valira requested he go with her. This was unusual. She had not traveled outside her flagship without reason, and she had never chosen a human to accompany her before. They arrived at the scout vessel and immediately saw the damage. The engines were burned and several conduits were melted. Ethan knelt beside the main engine, assessing the damage. Valira stood behind him, watching carefully, her eyes scanning every movement. "You will need to stabilize the core before we can replace the conduits," she said finally. Ethan nodded. "I can do that." She crouched beside him, her movements precise and careful. Together they worked in silence, adjusting the plasma flow and repairing the damaged conduits. At one point her hand touched his as she passed him a tool. Ethan froze. It was a brief contact, but the shock was electric. He could not stop his heart from racing. When the work was finished, she straightened and studied the ship's systems. "It is stable," she said simply. Her voice was calm, but there was something in it that Ethan could not describe. Gratitude, approval, something else entirely. Ethan glanced at her, unsure what to say. "Commander, the ship should be able to make it back safely now." She nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Ethan," he froze. She had never called him by name before. He turned toward her, waiting. "Stay nearby," she said quietly. Then she left. Ethan's mind raced. Stay nearby? What did that mean? He had no idea. He followed the usual protocol and returned to his quarters, but sleep did not come easily. The words and the contact lingered in his mind. Something was changing. Something about the commander that he could not understand. The next morning, the ship received an unexpected message. Another alien fleet, hostile and unannounced, was approaching their sector. The Kareth's Pride prepared for possible combat. Ethan was ordered to stay in engineering and ensure the engines and weapon systems were functional. As the enemy fleet appeared on sensors, the ship shuddered under minor attacks. Ethan worked quickly, rerouting power to shields and energy weapons. He could hear the alarms, the distant shouts of the crew and the quiet but tense orders of Commander Valera. She appeared in the engineering room without warning. Ethan looked up and she was not wearing her usual armor. Her ceremonial robe was simple, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She moved quickly to a failing plasma relay, her hands working alongside his. "Ethan," she said in a tone he had never heard before, serious but softer than usual. "We must stabilize the core together. Are you ready?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Commander." They worked side by side, adjusting conduits, rerouting energy, and repairing damage. The enemy fleet's attacks continued, but the Kareth's pride held steady thanks to their combined efforts. Ethan realized then that she trusted him in a way he had not understood before. She needed him. When the crisis was finally over, she stood beside him, breathing slightly heavier than usual. Her violet eyes looked at him directly for a long moment. "You are competent," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Ethan laughed nervously. "Thanks, I try my best." She gave a small nod and left the room. Ethan was left alone, staring at the sparks settling in the cooling conduits. Something had shifted. He did not know what, but the tension that had existed before was now different. It was not just curiosity or confusion, it was something deeper. Over the next 2 days, the crew began talking quietly. Small hints and whispers reached Ethan. They said the commander had noticed his actions during the crises, that she had been watching him closely, and that her behavior toward him was unusual. Ethan tried to ignore it, telling himself that rumors among Zevrans were not his concern. But it was hard. Every glance, every movement of hers felt like it carried meaning he could not interpret. Then, one quiet evening, Ethan was called to the commander's private quarters. His heart raced. No one had ever been called there without reason, and the idea of seeing her alone outside the formal ship duties made him nervous. He knocked lightly and the door opened. There she stood, calm as ever, her violet eyes fixed on him. "Ethan," she said simply, "come in." He entered slowly, unsure what to expect. She gestured to a small table. "Sit." Ethan sat, his mind spinning. She remained standing, her expression unreadable. "You have done well," she said. "During the crises, you risked yourself for this ship. That is rare among humans." Ethan blinked. "I was just doing my job, Commander." She regarded him quietly. "It is more than that. You acted without hesitation. You joined your strength with mine, and for that I have noticed you." He felt his chest tighten, noticing him. That sounded simple, but the way she said it, it carried weight. I'm glad I could help," he said softly. Valera did not speak for a long moment. Then finally she said, "I will watch you closely from now on. You are interesting, Ethan Cole." Ethan's mind reeled. Interesting? After being ignored for days, after feeling invisible, she finally spoke to him and called him interesting. He wanted to ask more, to understand, but no words came. He left her quarters that night with a mixture of excitement and confusion. Something was changing between them. Something he could feel but could not explain. The commander who had ignored him for so long had finally acknowledged him. And Ethan knew deep inside that nothing on the ship or in the galaxy would ever feel the same again. The next day, Ethan woke early, his mind restless from the events of the previous nights. He had tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he imagined Commander Valera watching him, standing close during the plasma conduit crisis. Her violet eyes, so calm and yet so intense, lingered in his thoughts. He shook his head, telling himself he was overthinking it. She was an alien, a commander, a leader of a fleet. He was just an engineer. Nothing more could ever happen. Yet as he walked through the metallic corridors of the Kareth's Pride, he noticed the crew glancing at him more than usual. Some whispered to each other, their voices low but curious. He could not understand their language, but the tone was clear. Something had changed. By mid-morning, Ethan was called to the observation deck. He found Lieutenant Dureth waiting for him, pacing slightly. Dureth was younger, not yet hardened by years of service, and he seemed uncomfortable. "You are requested," Dureth said in careful English, "to meet with the commander in the council chamber, alone." Ethan hesitated. "Alone? You mean without anyone else there?" Dureth nodded. "It is unusual, yes? But she insists. Ethan's heart raced. Alone with Valira, he tried to stay calm, but he could feel his hands trembling slightly. "All right," he said, and followed Dareth through the corridors. The council chamber was vast, with high ceilings and smooth silver walls. The lighting was soft, reflecting off the polished floor. At the far end, Commander Valira stood near a large viewport that showed the stars streaking past as the ship moved through the outer sector. She did not turn as Ethan entered. "Come closer," she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. Ethan approached slowly, unsure how to act. His mind raced, thinking of what he should say. She turned then, her violet eyes finally meeting his. There was a weight to her gaze that he could not describe. It was not anger, not suspicion, but something deeper. "You have been performing well," she said. "Your work in the plasma systems has saved this ship more than once. That is rare among humans." Ethan swallowed hard. "Thank you, Commander. I try my best." She tilted her head slightly. "Your best is more than enough. But there is something you do not understand." He frowned. "What is that?" Valira stepped closer. "Among my people, there are actions that carry meanings far beyond what humans realize. The acts you performed during the crisis when you stabilized the plasma core with me, they were significant." Ethan blinked. "Significant how?" "I was just fixing the core. That's my job." She shook her head slowly. "No, you did more than that. You joined your energy with mine. Among Zevrans, that is not a simple act. It is a bond, though you may not have intended it." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "A bond? I don't understand." Valira studied him, her expression softening ever so slightly. "You do not need to understand it yet. But know this. The ritual you unknowingly completed is ancient. It ties the energies of two beings together. Even if your intention was only to save the ship, the result is the same." Ethan's mind reeled. "You mean, what, like a partnership? A friendship?" Valira's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. "It is more than friendship. It is a bond that, among Zevrans, is often called a union of spirits. You cannot undo it. Only one can choose how to respond to it. The other must acknowledge it or reject it." Ethan felt sweat on his forehead. His hands shook slightly. I didn't mean anything. I was just doing my job. I don't even know what this means." Valira stepped back, giving him space but keeping her eyes on him. "Intent is irrelevant. The bond exists. The crew sees it. They speak of it. You have changed how they see me, and how I see you." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. His mind raced. He had never imagined that a simple act of repairing a system could have consequences like this. And yet, as he looked into her eyes, he could feel the truth of her words. She was not lying. The energy between them, the tension, the subtle recognition he had felt for days, it was real. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked softly. "Because you must understand the implications," she said. "You are now connected to me in a way humans cannot easily grasp. The crew will treat you differently. I will treat you differently. You will be noticed, whether you like it or not." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. "So, what does that mean for me? For us?" Valira's gaze softened further, though her face remained calm. "That depends on my choice. I must decide if I accept what has been joined or deny it. That is my responsibility." Ethan nodded slowly, though he was not sure he fully understood. I don't want to cause problems. I just want to do my job and help the ship." "You are helping more than you realize," she said. "And for that I am conflicted. Humans act differently than Zevrans. They do not understand the weight of energy bonds, but that does not make your actions any less important." For a long moment, neither spoke. The stars outside the viewport moved silently, distant and indifferent. Ethan realized he had never felt so small in the galaxy, and yet so significant to someone. Commander Valira, who had ignored him for days, now treated him with a weight he could feel in every glance, every word, every pause. Finally, she spoke again. "You will stay nearby for now. Do not leave your post unless necessary. This is for your safety and for mine. The bond has consequences. You may not understand them fully, but they exist." Ethan nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and awe. I will stay." "I understand, Commander." She gave a single nod and turned toward the door. Then, before leaving, she glanced back at him. "Ethan, act carefully. The energies you joined with me are not easily broken. Choose your actions wisely." He watched her leave, and once again he was left alone in the vast chamber, his mind racing. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had been drawn into something far bigger than himself, something ancient, alien, and incomprehensible. And somehow it involved him and the commander he barely understood. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed the crew behaving differently. Severance whispered as he passed, glancing at him with curiosity and something else he could not name. Officers treated him with quiet respect, sometimes deferring to him in subtle ways. Ethan tried to ignore it, focusing on his work, but he could not. Every glance, every murmur reminded him of Valera's words. He tried to act normal around her, but it was impossible. Every time she entered a room, every time her eyes briefly met his, he felt the pull of the bond she had described. It was subtle, almost invisible to others, but undeniable to him, and with each passing day the tension between them grew. One evening, while Ethan worked on a plasma calibration, Valera appeared in the engineering deck. She stood quietly at first, watching him work. He could feel her gaze, heavy and deliberate. "You are persistent," she said finally. "Your efforts have not gone unnoticed." Ethan straightened, a little nervous. "I just want to make sure the systems are stable, Commander." "That's my job." "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "But your job now carries more meaning than you realize. Every action, every decision, every movement, it is seen. And it matters." He swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. I understand. I'll be careful." Valera studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "You are human, and humans are unpredictable. That is interesting to me." Ethan's heart raced. Interesting. After days of being ignored, she had finally spoken to him with attention, with words that carried weight. He did not know what to say. He only nodded. "Continue your work," she said finally, turning to leave. "I will watch." And with that, she disappeared down the corridor, leaving Ethan alone, his mind in a whirl. The realization hit him once more. He had entered a world he barely understood, a world of ancient rituals, energy bonds, and the strange unspoken rules of a people far different from humans. And at the center of it all was Commander Valera Thane, who had ignored him for days and yet now had marked him in a way he could not escape. Ethan returned to his console, hands shaking slightly as he worked. Every spark from the plasma cores, every hum of energy, reminded him of the bond he had unknowingly formed. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know how to respond. But one thing was clear: nothing on this ship or in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The following days on the Kareth's Pride were tense. Ethan continued his work, making sure the plasma cores and energy conduits remained stable. But the tension between him and Commander Valera grew heavier, though neither spoke about it openly. He felt her presence even when she was not in the room, in the way the crew watched him, in the way the ship seemed quieter whenever she passed. The bond she had described lingered, invisible but undeniable. One morning, the ship received a distress signal from a human research station on the edge of a dying star system. The signal was weak, fragmented, but urgent. The station's protective shields were failing, and if they did not act quickly, the facility would be destroyed along with its crew. Ethan was assigned to prepare the energy relays for the faster-than-light jump, ensuring the shields could handle the additional stress. Valera did not call a meeting this time. Instead, she appeared on the bridge just as the crew was preparing to move. Her eyes scanned the readings with precise efficiency, but she paused when they met Ethan's gaze. For a brief moment, the usual coldness was gone. Something softer yet intense lingered in her violet eyes. Ethan felt his chest tighten. As the ship entered the unstable system, turbulence shook the hull. Warning lights flashed and alarms screamed. Ethan ran to the plasma core room where conduits were overheating. Sparks flew and the smell of ozone filled the air. His hands moved quickly, rerouting energy to stabilize the system. Every adjustment was delicate. A single mistake could destroy the ship. Valera entered silently behind him. Ethan glanced at her and she nodded slightly. She crouched beside him, her fingers moving over the conduits with the skill of someone who had done this countless times. They worked in silence, side by side, as the ship shook around them. At one point, her hand brushed his as she passed him a plasma coupler. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. She did not pull away. Her eyes were fixed on the controls, but he could feel the intensity of her gaze, the silent weight of something unspoken. When the conduit stabilized, Ethan leaned back, trying to catch his breath. "The system is holding," he said softly. Valera straightened, her expression calm again, though a faint flicker of emotion lingered in her eyes. "You acted without hesitation," she said quietly. "That is rare among humans." Ethan swallowed. "I did what I had to do. It's my job." "No," she said firmly. "It is more than that. You joined your strength with mine. That is not something I can ignore. You have changed more than just the energy flows." He stared at her, unsure how to respond. The words felt heavy, important, and yet he could not fully grasp their meaning. I don't understand," he admitted. Valera's gaze softened. "You will. Soon the bond we share will make itself clear. The actions you took, the energy you gave, it is now part of a connection that cannot be broken." Ethan's mind spun. "Connection? I'm just a human engineer. I didn't even know. I didn't mean—" "It does not matter," she interrupted. "Intent is irrelevant. The bond exists. The crew has noticed. The energies between us are joined. That is a fact, whether you accept it or not." He felt his chest tighten. He had spent days trying to ignore the subtle tension between them, hoping it would fade, but now she was speaking it aloud. There was no ignoring it. The alarms blared again, louder this time. A plasma conduit had failed in the forward section of the ship. Ethan and Valera rushed together to fix it, their hands moving in tandem, adjusting energy flows and stabilizing the system. The sparks flew and the lights flickered, but together they managed to prevent a critical failure. When the immediate danger passed, they both leaned back slightly, breathing hard. Valera's eyes met his, her usual calm replaced with something difficult to describe, an intensity, a focus, and a quiet acknowledgement of the bond between them. "You risk yourself too easily," she said softly. Echoing her earlier words, Ethan shook his head. "It's not about risk, I just try to help." She studied him for a long moment. "Helping is not enough. What you have done binds you to me. Do you understand what that means?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He did not understand. Not fully, but he felt it in the way her gaze lingered, in the way the ship seemed to respond to them as they worked together. Something powerful, something beyond his comprehension had changed. Later, as the ship stabilized and they prepared to leave the system, Ethan was summoned again to Valera's private quarters. His stomach tightened. He had never been called here without reason, and he could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on him. The room was simple, silver walls and soft lighting, with a large viewport showing the stars beyond. Valera stood near the center, her posture straight, but her eyes betrayed a hint of unease. "You must understand," she said, her voice calm but firm, "that the bond you share with me is now visible. The crew watches. They understand. They respect it. But you may not fully comprehend its significance." Ethan nodded slowly. I don't understand it yet, Commander. I only know. I feel it somehow." She walked closer, her violet eyes fixed on his. "The ritual of energy joining is ancient. It is meant to unite two beings in trust, in purpose, and in strength. Humans do not perform it knowingly. You did. You joined your energy with mine. That is now part of who you are." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. "So what happens now?" Valera hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Now I must decide whether to accept the bond or deny it. That is my choice. But the bond has consequences. You will be treated differently. I will be treated differently. And the ship, the crew, they will all recognize it." Ethan tried to process her words. He had spent days trying to navigate her silence, trying to understand the strange tension he felt. Now she spoke it clearly. He was bound to her in a way he had never imagined. "Do I have any choice?" he asked. Valera's gaze softened, though her posture remained firm. "Your choices remain your own, but the bond exists. It cannot be undone. What you do next, how you act, how you respond, it will shape what comes after." He nodded slowly, realizing the gravity of what she had said. He had entered a world of ancient rituals, alien customs, and invisible ties that humans could barely understand, and he was at the center of it, connected to the most powerful being on the ship. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed subtle changes. The crew treated him with quiet respect. Officers deferred to his advice in minor technical matters. The Zevran engineers spoke in low tones, glancing at him when they thought he was not looking. Even Valira moved differently around him, though she still maintained her strict, controlled exterior. One evening, a minor accident occurred in the secondary engine room. A plasma regulator overheated and the system began to fail. Ethan ran to fix it and Valira appeared silently beside him. Together, they stabilized the regulator, their hands moving in harmony. As they worked, their fingers brushed again. The spark of energy between them was unmistakable. Valira looked at him briefly, her expression unreadable. "You understand now," she said softly, "that your actions matter more than you realize. That is the nature of the bond." Ethan nodded, feeling both fear and awe. "I understand in part. I think I do." For a long moment they stood in silence, the hum of the engines filling the room. Ethan realized he had never felt so close to someone, yet so distant. The bond between them was real, undeniable, and yet he did not know what it fully meant. Finally, Valira spoke. "Ethan, you must prepare yourself. The next challenge will test both our strengths. You will need to act decisively, without hesitation. The bond will guide you whether you recognize it or not." He swallowed hard. "I will do my best, Commander. I promise." She gave a small nod, then left the room, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The weight of her words pressed on him. He was no longer just a human engineer. He was part of something larger, something ancient and powerful. And he knew, deep down, that the moment was coming when the bond between him and Commander Valira Thane would be revealed in a way he could not ignore. As he returned to his console, Ethan felt a strange mix of fear, excitement, and anticipation. The bond existed. The consequences were real. And soon, the commander who had ignored him for days would confront the truth of what had been joined. And when that moment came, nothing in the galaxy would feel ordinary again. The days after the energy bond crisis were tense, but the crew began to notice a change in the commander. Valira Thane's cold, distant demeanor was still there, but there were moments when her eyes lingered on Ethan Cole longer than before. The bond had become more visible, though subtle. Ethan could feel it whenever she was near, a quiet pull, a connection that hummed beneath the surface. He did not understand all of it, but he knew it was powerful. One morning, the Kareth's Pride received a transmission from a distant system. A Zevran supply convoy had been attacked by pirates. The convoy was heavily damaged, and without immediate help, it would be destroyed. The commander called a meeting on the bridge to plan the rescue. Ethan was present, standing among the engineers and officers. Valira spoke calmly but decisively, giving orders in her soft, precise English for his benefit. "Ethan, you will monitor the energy shields and ensure stability while we engage. The plasma cores must not fail. Understood?" "Yes, Commander," he replied. He felt a strange mix of nervousness and determination. This mission was dangerous, but it was also the first time he felt truly recognized as important to her. The ship jumped into the coordinates near the convoy. They found the pirate ships attacking, firing energy weapons that shredded the shields of the convoy. The Kareth's Pride moved quickly, raising shields and firing back. Ethan ran to the plasma control room, adjusting the energy flow to the shields as fast as he could. Sparks flew from an overloaded conduit, but he kept going, his hands steady despite the tension. Valira appeared beside him. She did not speak at first. Her presence alone made him feel focused and calm at the same time. She moved her hands over the consoles, adjusting power flows with him. The connection between them, the bond she had spoken of, felt stronger than ever. Every movement they made together was synchronized, instinctive, as if they could sense each other's thoughts. When the pirate ships attempted to fire a massive blast at the convoy, Ethan rerouted power to the front shields just in time. Valira's eyes met his, and for the first time she smiled. It was a small, subtle smile, but to Ethan it was like sunlight breaking through the clouds. "You've done well, Ethan," she said quietly. "Without your timing, the shields would have failed." He blinked, surprised. I was just doing my job." She tilted her head slightly. "No, you acted with understanding, precision, and courage. That is rare. That is why the bond matters." Ethan's chest tightened. He had spent so long trying to understand her, trying to follow the invisible rules of the Zevran bond, and now she was acknowledging him in a way that went beyond words. The battle continued for hours. Ethan stayed at his console, adjusting plasma flow, rerouting power, and stabilizing the ship. Valira remained beside him, occasionally issuing commands, her hands occasionally brushing his as they worked together. The energy between them grew stronger, almost tangible, and Ethan realized that their bond was no longer something hidden. It was alive, active, and undeniable. Finally, the pirates were defeated, retreating into the darkness of space. The convoy was safe, and the Kareth's pride had suffered minimal damage. Ethan leaned back, exhausted but relieved. Valera stood beside him, her eyes calm but softer than ever. "You have proven yourself," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not just to me, but to everyone aboard this ship. The bond has guided you, and you have responded with courage and skill." Ethan swallowed, unsure what to say. "I thank you, Commander. I just tried to do my best." She stepped closer, her violet eyes locking onto his. "Your best has done more than you understand. And now there is something I must do. Something I should have done from the beginning, but the timing was not right." Ethan's heart pounded. He felt the bond between them, alive and vibrating in the air. Something important was coming. Valera took a deep breath. "Ethan Cole, you are now joined to me in a bond that cannot be broken. Among my people, this bond has a name. It is a connection of trust, of strength, and of purpose. It is more than friendship, more than duty. It is—" She paused, her gaze never leaving his. Ethan felt the air between them shift. His mind raced, but he could not find the words. "It is union," she said softly, finally speaking the word that carried the weight of her people's customs. "And by the laws of my people it must be acknowledged. You are mine as I am yours." Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait, I don't understand. Are you saying—" Valera nodded. "Yes, you are my partner in this bond. My equal in this connection. My husband." The word hit him like a thunderclap. Husband. He had never expected this, not in 1,000 thoughts. For days he had wondered about her glances, her presence, the invisible pull he felt. And now she had spoken it aloud. He was stunned, his mind trying to catch up to the reality. "Husband?" he repeated, barely able to form the word. "Yes," she said, her tone calm but her eyes soft. "Among Zevrans, this bond is sacred. It is unbreakable. You are now part of my life in a way humans cannot easily understand, and I accept you, willingly, as my equal in this connection." Ethan's chest swelled with a mix of fear, awe, and something warm he could not name. He had never imagined this could happen. And yet, looking into her violet eyes, he felt the truth of it. The bond, the energy, the connection, they were real. And she had chosen him. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "You do not need words," she said softly. "Actions will follow. Your courage, your skill, your presence, they are enough. Accept the bond, Ethan, accept me." He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. I accept it. I accept you." Valera's eyes softened, and for the first time her full trust and approval were visible. She reached out, placing her hand on his. The contact was electric, yet calming. The bond between them pulsed, strong and unbroken. Ethan felt it deep inside, connecting him to her in a way he had never imagined. From that moment on, their relationship changed. The crew noticed immediately. The subtle tension, the quiet glances, the way the two of them moved in tandem. It was no longer a mystery. Ethan was no longer just an engineer aboard the Kareth's Pride. He was part of something ancient, something sacred, something that crossed species and cultures. Over the following days, Ethan and Valera worked closely together. The bond allowed them to anticipate each other's needs, to respond faster, to act as one during crises. The crew respected the connection, treating Ethan not just as a human engineer, but as someone important, someone bound to the highest authority on the ship. Ethan realized something else as well. He no longer felt nervous or uncertain around her. The bond gave him confidence, a sense of purpose beyond the job. And he could see it in Valera, too. She moved with less tension, her eyes brighter, her presence warmer, though still commanding. Together, they were stronger than either had imagined. One quiet evening, as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, Ethan sat beside her in her private quarters. She did not speak at first. They simply watched the stars, a shared silence between them. Finally, Valera turned to him. "You have accepted the bond fully," she said softly. "I have," he replied. "And I'm glad. I didn't understand before, but now I do. I trust you." Her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. "And I trust you, Ethan Cole. That is what matters most. The bond is strong. It will guide us, protect us, and shape what we do." He nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. For days he had wondered how someone so powerful and distant could notice him. Now he understood. It was not about recognition or approval or attention. It was about connection, about courage, about shared energy that transcended worlds. In that moment, Ethan realized that being called husband by the alien commander was more than a title. It was a promise, a responsibility, and a bond that neither time nor distance could break. And for the first time in days, he felt completely at home among the stars, connected to someone extraordinary, and ready for whatever the galaxy would throw at them next. From that day forward, Ethan Cole was no longer just a human engineer. He was a partner, a bonded equal, and a husband to Commander Valira Thane. And the Kareth's pride would carry them together through the vast unknown, stronger and united, a force that even the galaxy itself could not ignore. The bond had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again.